Sometimes we don't do videos that are all warm, fuzzy about commits and about the newest Noles to join a class. Sometimes we have to have hard conversations. And Michael Langston, senior recruiting analyst here on Warchant.com, is here for those conversations. He doesn't want to be as much as he is for the fun ones, but we have to talk about Florida State's linebacker board. And everybody, that's Michael Langston, as I said, senior recruiting analyst, Warchant.com. Hit the thumbs up video or thumbs up underneath the video for him. Subscribe to our channel. We're going to talk about what's next for Florida State at this position, so stick around for that. Michael, we have to start with Zadrius Rainey-Sale, Washington, Gavin Nicks, Miami, Tavon Wallace, Arkansas. Okay. What do you make of that, and what do you make of what just happened in the last week for Florida State when it comes to linebackers in the 2025 class?
Pretty much bad. I mean, everything about it is bad. I think Jeff Cameron kind of summed it up on Wednesday of kind of where my feelings mostly are is just this can't happen. This is unacceptable, and certainly something, especially the Zay Rainey sale one and the Gavin Nicks. You can understand Washington with being closer to home. We always felt like if FSU could get past that, I think they could land him. But obviously, there was a bigger feeling of staying home than it was not. And then with Miami, they were on Gavin Nicks, a really long time. So they certainly established some really good connections there. But Tavon Wallace, there is no excuse in missing that recruitment. There's just none. You've been leading the whole time. You're on him, one of the longest. He said FSU leads pretty much the whole process. And just the feeling I got was there wasn't the finish that it needed to be as far as finishing off that recruitment. He had a good relationship with the Arkansas DC, but still, FSU and Arkansas, the product, yeah, especially coming off a year that FSU experienced with the linebacker position on the field, you should not have any problems getting top linebackers to come. It's a really good class, 2025. There's a lot of top linebackers out there, but this is not something that should happen. That it should happen, especially coming off a good year, and then two, it's just I think as Jeff said, you got to stop. What's happening, and I think there's going to have to be an adjustment of how FSU handles this position, whether it's more guys involved that will have a greater impact from the high school market, or you just say, you know what, we're going to go to the portal and we're going to get linebacker recruiting, and we're going to do it that way because obviously they develop really well and it's lesser of a sell to get guys. But I think overall, if your focus is on high school recruiting, you clearly have to change some things. Whether it's Ernie Sims being more involved or somebody else being more involved that is missing in how you're finishing these recruitments. Because this is not new territory, guys. This is not something new. With what's going on in linebacker recruiting is they start good, the relationships are in there. They look like either the leader or one of the co-leaders, and then we get to the end and the result is no hat for FSU. And it results is, and in the day, we can whine and whatever use adjectives we want to, but the results are the results. And if you're really focused on getting high school kids, then from the linebacker position, you have to readjust the way you're doing stuff because this is almost like a 3 or 4 year pattern.
So, as much as you can go into detail, Michael, because I know these things like, the Wallace situation isn't the same as the Rainey sale, isn't the same as, a kid from last year or the cycle before that. Every recruitment is an individual process. Like you might have core things that you stick with, but, a kid might value the academics more or the staying close to home or the mom saying yes. But when you're talking about, so speaking generally, saying closing better, like, let's have the big boy conversation. Is that simply NIL? Is it that you need to check in more? Is it, I mean, like, what do you think from what you've heard is a reason that we're coming back to the same place? Florida State's coming back to the same place over and over, which is either in second place or in third place in some of these recruitments.
I think based on the history, the relaxation of the recruitment where FSU feels they're in a good place and maybe there's not a desperation
Ooh.
to finish it. That's how I'm feeling, when I see it, but a lot of these recruitments. So that's kind of what I'm seeing now. I'm sure there's NIL involved in because they are in all these kids, but at the same time, the recruitments are ending the same way. And if you listen to how these kids talk after whatever school they picked, and it's not FSU, um, they're not like it. I'll put an instance when Odell landed those two defensive tackles. What do kids do? They rave about Odell constantly, over and over and over. There's never something you have to worry about. Okay, they didn't get this kid because Odell didn't do something. There's a comfort level, but from the finishing standpoint, I'm not getting the impression that I feel like sometimes there's points in relaxing. Now, I don't think it's from the head coach, but whatever they're doing, um, the desperation to me is not there in the final parts of those recruitments.
Complacency. Ouch. That's not cool. If that's what's going on, obviously I can understand where there would be real
Yeah, and
frustration in that particular realm.
I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but that's both. All of them have the same feel because
Mhm.
we didn't hear a lot where when I was talking to these kids that even Greg Zay Thomas, who ended up at FSU, even Kevin Wynn and all these guys, when I talked to them, it was consistent. You felt like there was a desperation, like you have to get that guy. I looked at Zay Thomas like that's a must add for FSU's class. That's a guy you have to add. Same thing with defensive tackle. If they need to get one, they got both of them, which is phenomenal. Myron Charles, even when things are kind of trending, kind of a shaky point with
Yes.
Texas,
Yep.
they went in there, they got it done. They finished it. You're not. I don't feel I'm seeing that same desperation when it comes to linebacker recruiting at this point.
That was very interesting to me, Michael, because we had perhaps done some prep work for many recruitments and maybe
Yeah.
some kids coming home, and then Myron Charles out of nowhere because that was late on Friday
Mm-hmm.
evening. His exit interview didn't seem very good or positive.
No,
It didn't
it
seem like
didn't.
he had a great time, and then bam, you're right, out of nowhere, like oh. So
Yeah,
I guess
because
you're going to get both these kids between Wynn and Charles.
yeah, I'm not going to say. Obviously, I don't say what my FSU contacts or sources are, but I would say after that visit, I got a call. It was kind of like more subdued, and it's kind of like, yeah, we're in a battle. And then I got another call later, probably like 2 or 3 days later, and it was like the voice was much more peppier. And it's like, okay, this is looking good. It feels like it's looking good, and so I see that with other positions, but I don't sense that when I hit up guys. Like I don't think anybody knew the finality of Tavon Wallace. I don't even think Arkansas knew for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had a better view than what I was hearing from the FSU side, which is like, hey, we haven't heard anything changed. It looks good, but there was no finality like, hey, he called them and said, hey,
Yeah.
I'm likely coming. So I'm not hearing that stuff. So I don't want to say that that's for sure what's happening, but when you have a pattern of stuff with recruitments of how they end the same way, there's obviously some disconnect of what's going on as far as finishing it up with the recruitment. Now, I will say, looking for silver lining, guys. Here's the good news. I don't think that recruitment's by far anyway or close to being over with Tavon
Mm-hmm.
Wallace. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's certainly going to be one that he's going to. I do think he'll take visits. I think he'll take at least one, maybe two games to FSU. I do think he'll see one. So there's a chance to show where your product and his and what they do with development wise at the linebacker position, and maybe even the desperation relationship that you want to see finish the process can happen. But so there's still a chance, but it's concerning when you've gone through a 2-3 year pattern of these same things keep popping up.
Yeah, and Michael, I shouldn't have to pull up Arkansas's 2024 schedule, and
Yeah,
look for hope because of,
yeah,
a hot seat or whatever.
yeah,
And I have, and you could see it. You could see the light change on my face as I'm switching over tabs.
yeah.
But late September they play A&M. Early October they host Tennessee. Then they host LSU. Then they go on the road to play Mississippi State. That's not a guarantee for them. Then they host Ole Miss and they host Texas. So there's a patch there in, say, games 4 through 8 or 4 through 9, where they're going to be tested and they're probably going to lose most of those games. So you're looking for the result more than the process there to say maybe this thing isn't over, and maybe Arkansas is talking about a new coach, and so there's an opening for Florida State. I get your point. Florida State shouldn't have to look for an opening from Arkansas ever.
No.
But let's get to that hopeful side. You're saying that this particular recruitment's not over. What
Yeah.
about a kid? I know Alford's another player that they were in on earlier,
Yeah.
or Gavin Nicks, or could Rainey Sale decommit again from Washington for a second time? Just walk me through where you think Florida State's linebacker board goes from here into the season.
Yeah, the good news is, like I said, Wallace I think is still going to be in play. Alford, you've covered. I mentioned that people can read my breakdown last night that I did on what's next. I think Alford's the guy that I'm most focused on, and I hear some real genuine feeling that there's a shot there. Despite his Iowa State commitment, he visited FSU multiple times in the spring. He came there in the summer, had a 7-on-7. I think that's important to have him there, and he's always liked FSU a lot. He's really been really high on Randy. He's been very high on the defense of what Adam Fuller does. So there is definitely some movement, a movement of the needle, as the kids like to say or whatnot. But I think there's some movement there where they feel like there's a real shot with a guy like Alford. I do think he'll see FSU a few times. You got to remember EJ White is a guy that's on his team that's committed to FSU. I think he's a receiver that is also, so that helps the comfort factor. So I think that's definitely one that I'm keeping an eye on. Another one is Michael Hasty. He's committed to West Virginia, 3-star linebacker. I really love his film. Doesn't look like a 3-star when I watch him. So that's a guy that was originally going to officially visit FSU in that one of those June windows. I forget the exact date, but I want to say the 14th or the 21st. And so he was going to visit FSU. And I've heard that if they pushed, that was one that they felt good that they would get him. So there's definitely options. Gavin Nicks, that's going to be a toughish sale because I got the feeling like when he was on the visit, the connection was really good. Everything was really good, but he's worried, I think, about what FSU has done so frequently in his eyes of the portal. So that was something where it just turned me off where, once he committed to Miami, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's going to be a tougher challenge. I'm not saying it's impossible. We know Miami can definitely struggle on the field. Maybe that shifts him a little more than what we're hearing right now, but I think those other ones are definitely realistic. I think Rainey Sale is very realistic. If Jed Fish struggles the first year there, the new head coach there, and there's rumblings that, hey, this might not work, or there's just doubt creeping in to the family, they're gonna know, because I think if all things considered, if FSU was near Washington in some capacity and location, I think that's where he would go. I think he would go to FSU because I think he feels really good there. He loves what they do with their defense, the linebackers, and all that stuff. Connection with Randy's phenomenal. No problems with that recruitment. I think they did a really good job. Desperation, all that stuff. They were really good. But so I think there's definitely options. But as of right now, it kind of feels like crap. Just where they're at. Uh, um, Nothing take away from Ethan Pritchard. He's a really good linebacker, but they need at least 2 in this class. I mean, if you can get 3, I'd feel much more comfortable. But I think they definitely have to have 2. And when you miss on 3 targets in 1 week, that you officially hosted every one of them.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, no matter what we feel or whatever reason it is, that's a problem.
Yeah.
No matter what, that's a problem. So, yeah, Tom's right. When we started this, I don't want to have this conversation with you guys. Trust me, I don't. I think, and I want to make this clear, as a whole, I think this staff is extremely good, like a really good staff. But when you have weaknesses, and we've seen that to guys that were previously at FSU that FSU moved on from, even though we didn't hear it in that capacity, they went another direction. We know they're not afraid to make moves if they need to. And I'm not suggesting they do. I'm just saying Mike is a very sharp guy. He knows what he needs. He knows what he needs. And I feel very comfortable and confident that he's going to fix whatever the issue is in finishing these recruitments and linebacker recruiting.
It happened at defensive back. That I'll say that quiet part out
Yeah.
loud when they made a switcheroo at defensive back, and that was Florida State's choice. It may not have been reported that way, but it was Florida State's choice to go land a guy like Surtain. Man, look at how it took off.
Yep.
You're allowed to have the Azarie Thomases of the world at linebacker. That's what I said on the show today. Like that's allowed. It's Florida State. You're allowed to have great players at every position at Florida State. if you want the breakdowns behind the scenes, how Florida State is, pulling itself up off the canvas at this position and excelling at all the other positions because they're doing very well at the others, head to warchant.com, use code FSU and the number 1, FSU1, for 2 months for $1. Give it a try. Florida State obviously is going to be making some waves as we get through this holiday week, as we get into the middle part of July. And then it sounds like, judging by Michael, seeing some of these timelines of announcements and decisions into the month of August as well. So Florida State's going to be making some headway. Let's see how they react to the linebacker board and what steps they take. Head to warchant.com, the premium recruiting board. Again, use code FSU and the number 1 for $1 for 2 months to get to see how Florida State puts it together before the season. Michael, last thing I want to ask you. You love when I can ask you off-the-wall questions that an everyday Joe would. So here's what I'm going to do. When a kid chooses an institution that seemingly is off the board, I get there were ties to the family for Tavon Wallace. Yeah. But nobody had Arkansas as a finalist. It was Florida State and Georgia and Florida. The Arkansas was off the map. Could you see in this day and age that might be a tactic used by a kid to drum up the market so that when they get to December, he can have those schools perhaps bidding for their services down the stretch? I'm not saying about Tavon necessarily, but this is the era of NIL, and I think it's actually a pretty smart move if you're a kid to do something along those lines so you can get a nice offer in December. What do you think about that? Or am I nuts?
No, you're not nuts. I think it's a very realistic thing. We've seen that with a lot of kids going forward. And I will say this, because I don't want to be where I'm bashing him with Randy Shannon. Randy does a really, really good job with both the defense, because he's part of, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, he helps with the play calling on defense with Adam Fuller.
Yeah, game planning.
Game planning. He's also really good with their development. Look at their linebackers. Look at all the guys they've got. So he does a really good job with that. But to answer Tom's question directly, yes, that's part of the principle. We've seen that. We've already seen that with Southern Cal. They got 2 commits or 3 commits that one weekend. None of those kids are committed anymore.
Right.
Like Hilton Stubbs, I think, is going to end up probably at Miami. They already have decommitments from the 2 Georgia kids, and one's already, I think, likely to commit to Georgia, and then the other's probably likely there as well. So I think it is done for a principle to it's a business. It's a value of when you do that. And but I think also the other part is like who I feel like I'm the most comfortable with at this very second in this time. And it might be a thing where you're trying to draw it. There also might be a mixture of hey, that's the guy that I feel like. And here's the other factor. Florida State, Georgia, and Florida were the 3 teams that are always mentioned with Tavon. No matter who you talk to, go to Georgia site and go to Florida State site and go to Florida site. That was the 3 teams. So there's no doubt that there were certain people. We know his dad was a big Florida fan. We know things that there's connections within Georgia, and then we know people in his circle that probably love FSU as well. So all 3 of them are probably pushing a certain school. And what's the one school that you don't have to push that would surprise everyone? Arkansas, of course. Yeah, I think there's too many people in the family that were probably pushing them. So that's also a factor that it takes less pressure off a kid when they're going somewhere where they don't feel like somebody's pushing them there.
Yeah, it makes total sense to me. Like, on the one hand, think about it in NFL terms. Let's say Michael's Cowboys lock up CeeDee Lamb at $22 million a year and $80 guaranteed, and it's in July. And then we're just about a week before the season, and my Buccaneers say, you know what, we'll give you $27 million a year, and we'll give you $90 guaranteed. And he's wearing a Buccaneers uniform for game 1. That's how crazy college recruiting or high school recruiting is right now in the college game. But also, when you're coming in second and third consistently, that's a problem as well. So, Michael, thank you for making sense of it as best you can. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about linebacker a lot moving forward. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We'll be talking to you next time here on Warchant TV, and I'm sure for many more commits. Good news coming for Florida State at many positions. We'll see how they bounce back at linebacker. Thanks for watching, everybody.